no one's there, but we'll record it and we'll put it on there. You know,
Okay.
I think it'll be worth it.
Okay. Laura. You want to say anything? Hey, you get together. You encouraged me to come in.
No, I was thinking, I was like, I might as well just pull one up.
That's it. You say this will be recorded, so don't say anything you wouldn't want to be recorded.
Okay.
What's the recorder for?
This is for people that are here.
They didn't come, why were we recording?
You know, they pay members. And
You should come to the meeting. You should
I'm
come to
just
the
doing my
meeting.
best.
Look, you should come to the meeting.
Yeah, they're not on there. No one's on there, but we're still.
Okay, everybody. Should we kick off? I know there are a couple of people outside. But should we kick off? Who are we waiting for?
I'd rather have it chili than hot.
Okay. So, just let me know if you've got to think about it.
Now it's summer, you can never see me live.
So listen, we're going to adopt a slightly different format to this session. This session is about is exploring how do you create a global organisational culture. So what, is that a good topic for you? What's that? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So the way we're going to do this is each of our esteemed panelists are going to introduce themselves fairly briefly and just say a few words, if you wouldn't mind, about your global organisation culture. I've got some questions which I'm then going to ask them just to kind of get the discussion going, and then we're going to open it out to the floor. This session will last until about 11 o'clock. About 40 minutes. Okay, so can I ask you to introduce yourself? Let's just go from left to right. Ralph, would you like to introduce yourself? Say a bit about your global organisational culture.
Sure. So again, I'm Ralph Ishbear, and I work for probably the smallest company in our group. So I work with a company that headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. We have 4,600 employees worldwide. And so what that means is we have lots of little pockets of people. So like in Kiev, I might have 4 women, and so on. So it's very spread out. It's very, very good. Generally, Ralph Foreman is also a quintessential old boy Catholic. So we're an average alcohol company, which, interestingly enough, as small as we are, we happen to have the largest, most iconic brand in the world called Jack Daniels. And so that makes it very, very interesting from a culture standpoint, because it's largely driven by men, for men. And if I just quickly, I would say that vision is, we talked about in the mid-1980s, we had what's called a cafe, which is in the administration building, where a cafeteria across the street, where a lot of people places over Louisville. This cafe in the mid-1980s, women were not allowed to go into the cafe unless they were escorted by an executive in the organization. Mid-80s, we now have some of the highest ranking people in our organization, and they move throughout very, very fluidly. So the amount of change that this organization has seen is phenomenal, and that speaks to the willingness to talk about.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, so technical leader, I really have I would say the privilege to accompany Mark since 2001 on massive transformation, and we also hear from the external consultants who sometimes work with how the company has really moved from what we would say is like a mid-sized German company that was very international. So it was just like, you know, if you send a check back to Garden Shop once a year, just go do whatever you want. I knew the guy, just to tell you how not global we were. I knew the guy who spent the last 2 years before his retirement traveling to every site to find out what we were selling, which in the pharma world is really scary. We just didn't even know in Downtown what we were going on. But Mark has been on really a joint decision by the family, by the board. They've really been on a massive transformation to globalize, focus on innovative business sectors. And we've done a lot of activities, and I think what I would just like to sort of throw into the round before we go deeper into the discussion is that, for me, I really think that actually most companies actually do have a global culture. It's sort of that old saying, like, you don't have no culture, there is a culture. It's just first a question how to talk about it. And having run our first employer branding project, where we really wanted to create global employer brand, we were actually surprised how many commonalities as we did focus groups in the different countries. There really was a common mark culture that we first just needed to articulate. Some of it we thought was good, some of it we weren't so happy about, but I mean, there was a common culture. And then I think what you can do is really to articulate that, and then you can reinforce and establish aspirational aspects that you would like, to sort of push toward, and then you can reinforce that. And we've done some tools and some programs in various ways, which maybe I'll talk about later. So I just want to put that in the room as a kind of a, I don't think you're starting from a blank sheet of paper. I think you do have something to start with, and that's a good place to start.
But it's about articulating that and identifying
Exactly.
things, yeah.
Because usually people haven't put words to it.
Yeah.
And in fact, we had, when I did that employer branding project, we had headhunters we were talking to who said, we always have trouble convincing people to look at Mark back then. They might have a boring German company, but once they go there, we can't get them out. So if you could tell us why, what is it, then we might be able to do a better job selling your company. But we don't know what it is, that's keeping people there and why they just don't even want to talk to us anymore once we get there.
Thank you, Jennifer. Laura, how about you? How to introduce?
So I work with the Hilti Group, really interesting thinking about some of the conversations about global and local. Hilti is a family-owned global business coming out of Liechtenstein, which is a really tiny country, landlocked by multiple other countries, and grew up from the 1940s and gradually building this global presence around the world. Now having around 25,000 team members globally. But obviously, it's been a gradual process of sort of spreading out across the world and keeping the thread of the Hilti family and this whole start from being an entrepreneur and being very innovative and bringing new solutions for the professional construction industry. So it's very focused on engineering, process, lots of research and development, trying to find something new to bring to the industry to make work more productive, more safe for people out there that are building stuff. And what's interesting is how our culture has evolved. And where it started to move is with when Martin Hilti, one of the founders, had a heart attack in the 1970s, and there was this sudden, there's a risk and a threat that things could change in the future. And the business had started, from the 40s through to the 70s with this consistent thread coming through, and they brought in an executive board at that point. So in 72, they had the first executive board in place, which is largely consultants coming into the business and leading it forward in a business direction. And there was a fear from the Hilti family that they'd lose the family spirit and the roots of the organisation. And so they invested really heavily in that point in developing a family culture across the business and trying to bring that to bear and bring that feeling this is the way we do things in Hilti, in all the Hilti organisations globally. And I think that's certainly not without challenges. But what I want to share a little bit is, I think you feel that when you meet people from Hilti around the world, you get this strong sense of connection back to the family, back to the roots of innovation. So I think we've done some stuff extremely well in that way. But we're in a phase, I would say, since we started really in the diversity and inclusion journey, which is only really around 2013, so we're quite new into that space, but we're connecting to what we've done on culture so far into our diversity and inclusion journey. And I think we're asking ourselves some questions around, is it a global culture coming from this centre? How much influence does the culture of how we do things in Liechtenstein and Central Europe, how much does that impact our culture around the world? And should we be showing ourselves a mirror of what's the culture out there in other geographies?
Yeah, great
So
question.
it's a real transition for us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Danaher is a really interesting company. So we're 19 billion, about 70,000 employees, a little short of 70,000 employees around the world. So we are, for the sake of, and if you ever repeat this, I'll deny it. We're a really, really big private equity firm, is what we are. So we buy about 7 to 10 companies a year. And so we are very, very heavy in the M&A space. We have recently been doing a fair amount of divestitures as well. So we spun off about $6 billion of our heavy industrial businesses 2 years ago into a new publicly traded company called Fortive. And we just announced in March that we're spinning off $3 billion of our dental businesses into their own publicly traded company effective July next year. And so we have now evolved into what was a diversified manufacturing business into a really focused healthcare, life science and diagnostics business, which is about now 75% of our business. We're focused on healthcare. And so I tell you that to say a couple of things. The first is, because of how we do acquisitions, we do have a very strong culture, meaning that when we acquire companies, we go in with a very aggressive 100-day strat plan of how that business needs to operate with our focused set of tools called Danaher Business System, DBS. And DBS really drives the way that we do process, the way that we think about getting work done, the way that we think about going to market with customers, the way we think about all of our HR processes. So it's really a toolbox that we go and we set down when we acquire a new business, and it's a non-negotiable that that business will use DBS. And our 100-day strat plan with that business creates a pull for the DBS tools so that that leadership team really then begins to understand how to utilize it. So from how we do work, the culture is very strong no matter where you go in the world because of DBS. Now, a couple Danaher Business Systems. Business Systems. Yeah. So, and that creates a really, really interesting point for us, because in the transition from a heavy industrial manufacturing business to a life science and healthcare business, we've had to really think about the profile of person who used those tools to come to life. Because I was sharing this yesterday, in a heavy industrial manufacturing environment, your competitors, the competitor set of companies is about a low single-digit organic growth number. You now move into healthcare, and you have a high double-digit organic growth number, which creates a much different push for innovation than what we've had before. So those operators, strong engineering background operators that we would have hired when we were heavy industrial, now we have to hire those more innovative type mindset people who are more creative in how they think to really drive our businesses. So that's forced a real shift in the application of our culture because of the type of people we're bringing in. So it's actually happening at a really nice time for us to think about D&I, innovation, and that change that's happening in the organization. How do we, at the same time, use both of those to really change the global culture of the organization? And that's kind of where we're at today as we think through kind of driving forward. But it is not without a rub, though. And that's probably the biggest piece that we're seeing, is because you have those folks who are Danaher DBS purists, who've been with the organization for a long time and are some of our older operating companies, now competing with some of our newer operating companies. To give you an example, we have a water quality set of businesses, which is about $3.5 billion. If any of you know anything about wastewater, municipal water treatment, it's fairly traditional, right? So very male-dominated, typically in the middle of nowhere. And so a much different type of person than you think about a life sciences business that is heavily innovative, that you are going to be hiring a different type of person. And so, you have this one set of business that holds on to, we only hire engineers, we definitely want to use the tools in a certain way, to now this life science business that are saying, don't give us a set of tools because we think very, very creatively. So it's a really interesting place for us right now in the evolution of our culture. And we're doing some great stuff to try to get ahead of that and accelerate it at the same time that I can talk about it.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm really interested to know more and to know more about DBS, like what those tools actually are, and from all of you actually about the tools that you're using. But before we go into that, I want to return to a question that was asked about to what extent is the goal of a global culture something that is is a legitimate goal for your organisation, or is an intentional goal for your organisation? It's clear that it is for you, but so I was curious, is that where you're heading? Does having a global culture matter, and to what extent does it matter?
I think you have to, we have to be a little bit careful, because when we think about culture, we tend to think first just about nationals. And obviously we were having that discussion in our previous group about, obviously when you talk about global companies, they're always influenced by the national culture where they're headquartered.
Yeah.
And we tend to think of a global company like GE or Microsoft as just being global, but actually they're American global. So I think, this is the first thing which you just have to kind of accept that that culture, and I mean, if I go to market in China, you get people who are more comfortable working with Germans. I mean, just from there. So what I think is important is that as a company, and that was a big part of our process, it was actually to, in a certain way, I mean, we continue to work on those topics of how we communicate across cultures, like, yes, I mean, do that. But then in a certain way, you look at what are those components that we need to have, what are those values, and we really drove it through a values conversation, and also through a kind of business strategy conversation, is what are those values that we need to have in common to make sure that we can work together, that we, particularly as we went global, and we have to work more across this country lines, that we're clear about what are the values, what are the behaviors, the competency model. And I'm one of the big defenders in our organization that those two things, your values, your competencies, those have to be consistent if you're trying to operate globally. Because you've got to have that language where people can sort of tap into and say, okay, I don't think we're being respectful in this conversation, or I don't think we're being transparent, or we act with integrity, therefore, so, and I think that's where you have to, when you start to work in your culture, where you've got to be, let's say, more specific about what are these components, and will that play out in the different cultures of countries? So that's going to have a different flavor in China than in South Africa. But that's okay. And because then we still have kind of basis on which we can work with.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Jennifer. Laura, what were your thoughts about that? Whether it's
Yeah.
global culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think within Guilty, as I mentioned, it's somehow retaining the essence of the organisation. It's very linked to our business model and how we continue to innovate. So I would say, it's essential to have those common threads. But I mean, you made there, having local flavour, I think is definitely something that we need to have. Within our culture, and I see that actively. But we move a lot of people, or a lot of times around the world as well. So, we have people moving cross-functionally and people moving globally as well. And so I think if you want to keep doing that, I think it really helps to have somehow a common thread and a common culture, that people have some basic elements of their work that are consistent as you're moving through and into different parts of the world. I think it makes it a lot easier to do that.
How far are you on this?
The same goes true. I think that Crown Point in 2012 will be 150 years old. And the family is the dominant shareholder group, so we're publicly traded with family, really run.
Yeah.
And everything we do is based upon our values and our behaviors, which are consistent with family perspectives and values and so on. So that's global, no matter where you go. And if you videos, family members talk about their experiences growing up, their experiences being in the business,
Yeah.
is global and very, very strong. That drives so much. And so the challenge with respect to D&I is sometimes we have to be very careful to make sure that we're not saying, oh, the family stuff is not real great. So when we talk about changing the culture, there are plenty of family members who work there who also are very, very proud of the culture. So part of what we're doing is we're supporting and trying to advance the culture, not
Yeah.
to we just want to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
It's interesting that so many of us are from
Family, yeah.
companies, and I guess not.
Well, we were founded by two brothers.
Okay.
And the brothers are the chairman of the board, and both of them are still on the board, but they are, yeah, no, we're not.
Great.
I was gonna say, actually using D&I's platform, we went through a very unique exercise a few years ago where we started with a problem. The problem was a company had rebranded, and the corporate brand they decided upon was we wanted to be smarter together with our clients. Yet we weren't being smarter together inside the company. So long story short, we got a new CHRO, and we decided to, and it was part of the inclusion engagement role that I'd taken on, we decided that we were going to do an assessment of the global brand, 15,000 employees, 48 countries, and we were really mature in Switzerland. We didn't like the brand that we were. We were trying to expand into new markets and grow the brand, and in countries like in Brazil, nobody knew who we were. So what we did was we decided, we took all of the different values and aspirations of our corporate brand, and we put them into a succinct set of attributes, and we said, okay, these are the core that we want across the globe, and these included, of course, our values, the things that are non-negotiable in our performance management process, and we said, let's incorporate this into our brand, and then we developed target talent profiles, 7, because some of those profiles would differ based upon our different businesses and markets, and then essentially we, implemented that across the world. And so we had, consistent employee experience, or at least, theoretically, this is what we were implementing, but yet it allowed for variation on the theme, that's of course needed in different markets. So really, really cool project that is probably a 3 to 5 year, strategy.
Well, and I'd like to emphasize one point, because we are talking about farming culture, and it's been something I've certainly been consciously trying to defend, is that in fact, one of Merck's strengths was our knowledge of local markets. So we hired a guy who had worked for Pfizer in Guatemala, and he was like, you know what, I was so jealous of Merck there because they had such a strong brand. We were known in many developing countries as being a mark of quality. And so we actually had a stronger brand presence than a company like Pfizer in some of these smaller countries because they were kingdoms, but there was a strong local ownership. And I think that this is actually something that you also don't want to lose in such a process. That you may need a global culture, but you don't want to have that where it's just like you're just sending all the branding materials from Darmstadt and, they can't, in China it doesn't work, and then they're just sitting there. So I think it's also important to navigate your way through that you say, okay, it's so important in countries to also have that local knowledge. That's what we say for diversity, that you need to reflect your customer base.
Yeah.
And so, to really actually make that part of that culture conversation.
The only thing I would say about that is we have a very strong brand for employees internally, which is very different than external, right? And those two things really almost have nothing to do with each other because we are 30 independent operating companies who all have their own president, who all have their own head of HR, who all go to market as their name, right? So many of their customers will never know they're owned by Danaher. None of our companies have a Danaher company on them. right? So it's all completely independent, and that is, so there, and the reason we do that is to maintain that local connection with customers to that brand and whomever they know that brand to be. We don't want to change that, right? However, when we're recruiting talent, we do have a brand, and we put Danaher on that for talent. So that talent understands when they come on board, they can have a career spanning 30 companies once they join the inside of the company. And we make a promise to the employees to understand that we're helping realize life's potential externally, but also for them as associates. So we run this two-sided kind of yin-yang type thing where we want to make sure that if an operating company is using the Danaher brand, there is consistent messaging with they're using it with their associates. But when they use it with their customers, we absolutely, we have one operating company that has a Danaher company, and it took almost a year for our CEO to approve that. He was very, very skeptical of using a Danaher company at all, so.
How long can an employee expect, well, an employee may not even know, how long would an employee be owned within the Danaher umbrella?
Be owned, so.
In other words, you buy these companies and then you spin them off again.
No, I mean, so that's why I said private equity. I just gave you that for a picture. Our intent is not to, so the difference with us in private equity is our intent is not to spin off. Our intent is that long-term they're part of us. We're doing these divestitures right now to really double down on life science and diagnostics. So the intent is not to spin them off, so the employee will be with Danaher for their career. Yeah. But to say that we're 70,000 employees, we only have 200 employees who actually paychecks are signed by Danaher.
What I found also shapes organizational cultures and reflecting on what you said, it's the type of structure or business model.
Yeah.
And working in a partnership, I realize every day when I hear you talking about how different it is from working in a corporate environment and in a family-owned business. I also find that the profession shapes a lot of the culture, meaning it's nothing different than I work in a partnership of accountants that sets up a lot of the implicit and explicit expectations from people, and whether we want it or not, that shapes our culture. Then I found, we went through the whole exercise of, coming from that loose network of local practices and building one brand of integrated processes and practices. We went through the exercise quite a long time ago defining corporate values. Of course we have those values, but I think that an important role we as DNI practitioners can do is to remind constantly our leaders to the point that the normative behaviors around these values might vary from culture to culture, and that it's not about addicting a series of behaviors that say you will be respectful. It's about understanding how respect manifests itself, sometimes differently in different cultures. So there is always this global versus local tension, which is, my everyday environment. And the last thing I wanted to point out is what helps a lot is we define leadership competencies.
Yep.
And leadership is not as being tied to leadership, because we're growing our people, everyone can become a leader in theory in our type of organization. So defining these not in terms of attributes that someone has or doesn't have, but in terms of competencies or skills that we acquire. And that keeps us away from, again, going back into the behavioral piece, which is quite tricky to navigate inclusively when we do this.
What would you say drives the culture? What would you say drives the culture?
It's a combination of things. It's
Sure.
the governance, the structure of the organization, its geographic spread, its profession, which builds all the professional backgrounds that are in the company and the type of work that you do. And it's also a lot, because I saw our corporate culture evolve. It's a lot depending on the leadership group and what they bring with them.
So one of the things
And that is a topic.
So one of the things that I wanted to just touch on quickly is the last thing that you said, as I thought about talking to this group. But what would I like to share with you? And I think one of the things that I would like to share with you is about leaders driving culture, and especially at the executive level. So as a member of the executive leadership team, one of the things that I think oftentimes we don't think about in talking about those below the executive, we don't think about how human they are and how insecure they can be and what is truly important to them. Because most executives always know, always have an answer, even if the answer is the best answer, they got an answer. And it's amazing how clear they can be in those positions. But the truth of the matter is that it's amazing how insecure they are. And so what happens, for example, in D&I, what I have found is that many executives struggle with leading because they're so insecure around the topic and whether or not they really have credibility to lead in that space. Whereas the CFO's got no question about it. His CFO capability in this case, her capability, none. But as you move along, understanding those things and then understanding how to leverage those things for the benefit of the organization and impacting the culture are really terribly important. So, for example, my current CEO, he grew up in a family where his father's a doctor. What he learned was care for people. His sister was in an auto accident and she was mentally disabled. He lived in a family, in a household where he cared for people. He brings that mindset to this organization, which combined with the family sense of values and caring for people, it gets spread throughout the entire organization. People begin to pick that up, and you begin to bring in people into the organization who have that kind of mindset. So knowing who they are is really important. Former CEO that I had, his only concern was compliance. He was only concerned about the stock price and anything that might disrupt the stock price in life. I knew that. He never would allow me to do on his calendar, so what did I have to do? I spent time with the head of legal and saying, you know, CEO never spends any time with me. If we were ever to have a problem, I would think someone would come in and ask him, will you spend any time with the CEO? And the answer would be no. The next day, guess what? I was on his calendar. We were having discussion. All of a sudden, you begin to know how to manage the culture because leaders drive the culture. And I would agree with you. Many, many other elements to that. Many, you're absolutely right. But one element of that is leadership. So I'll stop there.
I think that's important. I mean, I think it's important that leadership's driving, and I was just reflecting as you say that. Leadership drives it, but it's also to get your leader to trust you.
Absolutely.
In a way, I mean, the vulnerability my CEO will show me now is very different than when I started with this, and he will ask me, I was sharing with somebody yesterday, I had a conversation with him yesterday, just getting him to use some words to change his vocabulary on some things, and he said, I would have never known that, right? So thanks for telling me that, and now it becomes part of his vocabulary, he messages it the way he needed to message. But that is, I think there's one, me understanding what his levers are, but then number two, not him understanding that he doesn't have the expertise, and he's vulnerable enough now to come to me all the time. You know, we just had a board meeting, and he's like, you come talk to the board because you know the stuff to say now around this. So there's this switch flipped, and I think that level of trust, because it really now empowers me to drive the culture in a much different way.
I was just going to say that if you think back in the last couple of decades, there was a push to drive a culture towards codes of conduct and ethics. And that was done to protect companies from risk. And so I love the idea of an internal and external culture discussion because they are very different. But if we, D&I professionals, want to push for action through culture, I think following the path of the success of those that focus on compliance and codes of conduct, to weave that into the fabric of culture through action is the magic. Moving away from convincing people through a business case is passé and a failed endeavor, in my view. But moving action by convincing those and leaders that would speak it, that the culture is this, acting within the culture means acting in furtherance of D&I, I think is the path forward.
It's the human element, it's the human element, right?
Yeah.
It's how they show up.
Is that the approach you're taking in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all on a journey, and the journey changes when leadership changes. And so we have a new, we're starting on a new journey. But I think it's important when you have the opportunity to start on a new journey that you put it on a path that, could lead to the most success.
I would like to share maybe one tool.
Yes.
We did have it, we did it some years ago, but it was really to some of these points. I mean, I also work in the, it's pharmaceutical supplies, so, it's a bunch of engineers, and they're happy to talk about mouse data all day long. But when we came up with our company values and we started talking about, okay, we need to cascade this now, we had values in different countries, but we then established really a common set, And they were really knocking on my door like, so Jennifer, when are you going to come to Austria? Because I was going to be traveling around with my little bag of all the values. And, when I started saying, we're going to come up with a way so that you can talk about values with your team, they were terrified. They were like, values? I can't talk about values. And I was like, you're a person. You have values. And I'm like, yeah, but how do I know if it's right when I'm saying? And they were just terrified. And what we put in place was something from an agency in Germany, but I think it's a common methodology in the meantime, that was what we called a dialogue map. And this was about 10 years ago, so it wasn't digital at all. It was really like a game. We had this, and it was really something you put on the table. There were little cards. There was like a super detailed guide of name a timekeeper, say hello to the team, everything, what to do with this discussion, because a video for the board members. And the thing about not only having this super prescriptive kit, but we also, at that time, we did a strict cascade starting with the board. So that basically the managers didn't just get this thing on their desk, they were in a discussion before they had a discussion. So they really had a chance from the very top of the organization to say, yeah, but this whole thing about transparency, does that mean we're going to talk about M&A deals with all employees? No, that's not what transparency means. So everybody had the chance to kind of have a conversation with their peers, with their manager, and then really at the end of those workshops, also as a kind of signal, they were handed their kit, okay, you've been in a workshop, now you are going to go do one.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about this was, we covered 95% of our employee population. And literally what happened also through that was, some months later, our CEO did a visit to a production facility in South Africa. And really one of the black South Africans on the production floor approached him and said, thank you so much for respecting us enough as employees here on the production floor, because we also have values. We're also people. We really felt that you were treating us as people who could engage in such a conversation, and that we could apply, that we could also think about who are our stakeholders and how do the values apply to our work. And the CEO, I think that was the first moment he actually came back and he was like, that was actually a good idea.
Could I add just one quick thing to that? Just quickly. The one thing that's important, I hope you take away from that, is that the leaders need as much psychological safety as other employees do, but we don't think of them as needing psychological safety. But the need is significant in many situations.
They came back and they were so proud. I have the same ones who were terrified. My daughter came back I did a great workshop.
And I think that's a great segue. Maybe Laura, you can share the culture journey and the Sherpa figure we have.
Yeah. I think we can ask the question a little bit about what's the way that you anchor the business. Yeah, we have this whole community of Sherpas in the city, which from that starting that we're going to create a culture journey, we started to put people in specific roles that were aimed at being Sherpa for our culture and creating that culture in the organisation. And they're leading then these team camps that every team member gets the opportunity to experience. And we started with figuring out the values, and we worked on topics that take the culture forward. So also taking time out as a team to figure out, what's the contribution that I'm delivering, and also Appraisal, bringing the customer to the fore in those sessions and figuring out that everybody has a role to play, like you said, people that are on the production line, for example, being participative in those sessions and going, okay, this is what we produce, this is the reason that we're here, and everything that we're all doing is super worthwhile to the ultimate aims of what we're delivering as an organisation. But I mean, that community's grown significantly over the years, and I think for us it's somehow the secret to how we keep the culture moving forwards is having those key people that have grown in the business as well, that they're usually, in most cases, people that have been within the organisation some time, have experienced the culture from different perspectives, different functions, and they're now coaching teams through a series of workshops. And although we have a common start point with those workshops, so the Sherpas all come in separately when we're building the next phase to the team camps. They have a product that they're going to work with, essentially. They flex that also around where we're at in the culture in their particular parts of the world, and are able to adapt it so that it fits more strongly to what's going on. We had a conversation about that yesterday, right?
Yeah.
How you guys are
Yeah.
the next camp.
And it's a very structured program. It's been going on for 15 years now. We're in what we call Team Camp 7. Each of these have different themes. The 6 was working inclusively. The 7 that's starting next year, actually this year in North America also, is mindfulness. So it's a 2-day program where every single team member is on campus to experience this. The first day it's culture and strategy, and the second day it's team focus. So we do in North America have a chief spirit Sherpa who reports directly to the CEO, and her job is to keep our culture. And then I work with her directly, so that's how we're embedding the inclusion into it. So our Team Camp 6, the first day was culture, basics, and business. The second day was an unconscious bias training. So all our team members did it. It takes about 18 months to get the 3,600 through it. And it's also structured, as you mentioned, Jennifer, the executive board goes through it, and then the global executive management team goes through, so everybody goes through the experience. And then once you go through the experience, you are the strategic Sherpa. So you have the spirit Sherpa, which is the culture guardian, and then the strategic Sherpa to talk business, and then you have a conversation as a team. And it works really well because you're able to incorporate the values, the global values, and then bring it to what is important locally. And the conversation was that in North America, for us, inclusion really is embedded. And it's interesting that our team members are not asking if, it's like, wonder what inclusion topic is in the next one, because we get all excited, right? There's a theme, and it's usually beautiful places we go to. And we have 3 hours that's usually open for a local topic. So we've had a research with the University of Houston that gave us specific skills that need to be addressed as an organization. So we're going to do that soft skill training, that inclusion, in the second day. So it's
Thank you very much, Sherpa.
That's excellent. So this year, and by the end of the year, we want to have pretty much everyone trained. We launched the Culture Start Training. That's a program very similar to the ones you described. And the The bad thing is that it has been launched only for and by industrial. So we have electrical and industrial. So no way to have electrical on the same journey. So this is very stupid because it's super nice. And so I'm moved a bit my responsibility from talent management and IND to culture. So I'm leading this and I'm pushing to have next year for electrical. So we have a one-day workshop and we started from the very senior leader. They became trained, they have been trained to be became facilitator and then going down. And now we are delivering, we started from US, but now we are delivering locally at each site in local language because people need also this kind of, so the deck and all the teaching notes that are very detailed, also in this case, so it's a kind of a good package. For the leaders are only in English, but they speak in the local language when they deliver. And inclusion and diversity is a piece. It's more like we call the leadership attributes that are part of our culture, and they are new in the sense that have been added 2 years ago. So like transparency, very ethical, transparent, passionate, that's the one I like. And so there is one leader who facilitates the session on each of them. This is the way to run the culture. And it's very, very effective. So I want just to share this. And then I have like a little story to share what we were discussing about moving to action and having the leaders changing mindset because they have done like a emotional experience, not because they saw the business case. So when the actual executive sponsor of the EMEA Regional Council, that is a senior vice president of one of our electrical divisions, volunteer or accept the role to be the executive sponsor. And I met him for the first time. I said, okay, maybe he will be the next EMEA president. So we try to get more network with this role. So I saw in that I got the feeling that maybe it's not super involved in this, maybe he's doing for his career, but that's fine. So I prepared him to go to be part of the panel at the Society of Women conference. And I prepared him because he needs to be prepared. And then I say, okay, there's just one thing. You will be just like a man in front of hundreds of women. So remember that it could be a bit also, yeah, don't worry. So I'm presenting in every situation. So after this, he really enjoyed, he learned a lot, and he said, thank you. I think you really opened my mind, my eyes, sending me to this conference. And you were right. I was a bit concerned to see all these women in front of me and looking at me, but then it changed completely the way he was committed to do it. And this, people can see this. And so this is one action. So going through, every leader going through an experience can change their behaviors and they can be role models.
Of course,
Thanks, Sarah. So I guess my answer or my questions part would be answered already, certainly guilty. But my key question really was, is inclusion, does it form part of your global culture? And if yes, how? How's it kind of embedded in your global culture? So really to anyone in the panel or in the room.
So we have what we call leadership anchors, which are our 5 kind of core pillars of what we think about leadership is at the organization. Every employee has them on their performance appraisals with the 5 leadership anchors. January 1, 2018, we went through and rewrote all the leadership anchors to embed D&I into every single one of the anchors. So we put specific language into every one of the anchors, as well as innovation language. So now we wanted to make sure that it was no longer, no one could say, oh, D&I is something else. Now it is embedded in everything that we do from a core perspective. And so that was our way of doing it. So now I can point a person back and say, if you think it's not on your review, it is on your review, and now it shows up in the behaviors that we're expecting from a leadership perspective.
And it's the same for us at Merck. So we really, when I did the last redesign of our competency model, we really used the competency model, which in our case, we specifically don't call them leadership competencies because we say they're for everybody, but we level it according to the job levels. And then the great thing about that, and I really even worked with the, innovation diversity in the marketplace report about what are the inclusive behaviors that drive innovation in companies. I embedded all of that. I mean, that's the great thing about not only being in D&I, but having responsibility for the competency model. I just put it all in. And as well the innovation, because that's a big kind of aspiration for us, and to shape employees' thinking. That it is expected that we have, like, go digital is one of our competencies, by the way, this is expected of everybody. As well as an inclusion is embedded, I would say, in several places, because it's about networking, it's about respecting other views, there's really different aspects of inclusion. So it's not like there's only one in this inclusion, it's really embedded throughout. And the really charming thing I find about that in today's world and in a global organization, then if it's in the competency model, it's in all your leadership trainings, it's the basis for the multi-rater feedback, it's like, then it is, then you're really starting to get to the very concrete levers where people are just confronted with it constantly. I mean, that's like, just make it so they can't escape it. It's my philosophy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I ask, I love what you said, Ralph, earlier on about you were thinking, what's the thing I want to share with the group? So I was going to ask the panelists to end with, what's the thing that you would like to share? You've shared a lot already. What's the thing you'd like to leave this group with in terms of creating a global organizational culture? An insight from each of you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe from my perspective, I think it's having faith that it is something that's evolving, and it's not necessarily a constant that we do through the course of working together. And I think having these Sherpas is somehow Hilti's way of guiding that process and keeping it moving. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Laura. Anybody else?
One quick thing that I wanted to share is that, again, leaders shape the culture. I recognize that there are lots of other elements in this. I just wanted to hone in on one aspect. And the thing that I would say to you about leaders and shaping that is, don't underestimate the power of emotional commitment. I was talking about just a second ago. And how you get leaders to be emotionally committed is where the stickiness comes with respect to this work lasting. And leaders are very, very open and vulnerable to storytelling. And it's amazing how impactful folks will be when they hear these compassionate, these compelling stories that are riveting. They grab them and they hold on to them, and they will talk about them years to come, and it drives their movement. An example would be a woman who talks about what does it mean to be gay, and to sit in a room and have leaders listen to her saying, I get more respect in Brown-Forman than I do from my mother as a gay woman. That is so good for the leaders in the organization. You heard Ralph say, for years I was wandering around in this company, lost in the wilderness, and now I feel like you are connected and I am engaged. That means volumes. Emotional commitment is crucial.
Storytelling.
I think what I'd like to do is even emphasize that together with your earlier point about, I think we really all have to acknowledge vulnerability in leaders. It's something as a consultant told me the first time we were doing an acquisition, a bigger acquisition, was he said, actually leaders have the hardest time usually changing, because look at where their behavior has brought them. I mean, they're making piles of money, they're incredibly visible, I mean, you know, they can look at something on paper, but for them really to take that risk with all that visibility, to do something different, feels incredibly, even more vulnerable for them because of kind of what they're sitting on. And that this is where I just think, for all the frustration we have, and we'd love to see things go faster, but I think really having, in a way, that compassion and looking for those concrete things to give leaders experiences, to give them, to help them go through the change process in a safe way so that they don't feel like they're putting themselves or the company, depending on the topic, at risk. And so I just think that's an important piece.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to add. I think that's a great point to talk about, the change process for leaders, because that, unless they change, the culture's not gonna change, right? I mean, it's how they show up, it's how they act, it's how they perform. But I would just also say, don't be afraid to continue to challenge their cultures. And that's the piece that I find that has probably earned me a lot of respect is the continual challenge of it. And that there's nothing sacred about a culture, right? And that it needs to change because people are constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so how do you not continually have a culture that is evolving with that? And that's the piece that I think we've become really receptive to that. So.
Yeah. So using your own power and your own, as your DNI leads.
To really, because we're bringing the expertise into that.
Yeah. Sorry, mate.
I just have one question about informal leaders. We haven't spoken about them. They're throughout the organization. They may not have a title of leadership, but they're carrying a lot of weight. Can you speak a little bit about them and how they influence the culture?
I would just say for us, I mean, it's identifying them, right? I mean, it's identifying who they are and talking to them. And we have various different programs that we use to identify those leaders to accelerate their development and make them formal leaders, right? I mean, that's for us that is utilizing our presidents to nominate those folks in. And even in that process, I will say though, we've put in place now a metric to say how many of those folks who have been tapped as future leaders, informal leaders that have power in other parts of the organization, how many of those folks are diverse, right? Because now I'm looking at metrics of that and saying, well, that's great, but let's develop informal leaders in other places, and sometimes we may have to go do that work. So, yeah.
Add to that just a little bit. I think it's a great question about informal leaders, and we talk a lot about influencers. But one thing I just want to add to the point, Ernest, that you made is that we've started asking the question of people, who do you think are leaders? And everybody looks up and they look at somebody else, and we've started saying, no, if you manage people, you are a leader. You are a leader. You have responsibilities. There are behavioral expectations of you. We expect you to be vulnerable. We expect all of these things of you. Because what we realized was everybody was looking to our senior leadership team and saying, oh, those are the leaders. And we wanted to change that dynamic.
Yep.
And so while, yes, we do have influencers and people who don't have an executive title, we're also trying to broaden those responsibilities out.
What I say in my organization is everyone is a leader. Everyone has responsibility to lead. Yes. And I also say that when you look at our ERG members, they are leading all the time. They are taking risks. They are demonstrating courage. All the things that we say we want others in the organization to do and other leaders to do, they are doing. And I want to be recognized because in many ways, ERGs are like a petri dish. They are doing what I'm asking others to do is to look at how they're leading the risk that they're engaging in. And in fact, they're doing it in the most difficult of circumstances because in many ways, ERGs are like non-profit organizations. Mm-hmm. They have people, everybody can get up and lead. And they are trying to lead and influence the organization in a way that
Great. Thank you all very much indeed for a really
Thank you.
Thank you all. We've got 15-minute break then, not an hour now, then we've got Tom Dill. So